windows down in the Dominator 3, and I was trying to eye an intersection just a little bit to the east. That's where I was going to drop the spikes into the ground, drop the hydraulics, flush to the ground in the Dominator, and then ride out the tornado. But it peeled off a suction vortex that shot north at about 60 miles an hour, slammed into the Dominator, and it had winds of about 135 mile per hour northerlies on the backside of the Dominator, and with a vortex moving at 60, it had about 240 miles per hour just on the front side of the Dominator. That was enough to spin it around in a circle, and I actually thought for a split second that we were airborne for 2 seconds, and then the next second I realized we were okay and the windows were down. But I figured I'd start off with this first most insane intercept here and watch the air cannon launch, because right after that poof of air shot out, it ramped up the vortex and then impacted the Dominator 3.
Got it! Alright, I'm launching! Shoot it! Shoot it!
Here, hand it back to me. Yep.
Oh! Oh yeah! Yeah!
But there's the vortex cutting right through the corn, and then it hit the Dominator, spun it around in a circle, and then chaos ensued. It's happy to still be on the ground.
Holy crap! We spun around! We got it! Did we stop recording? No, we're recording.
See, we're facing north now here.
There it is. We're good. Everything's fine. Roll it down there. It's not even wet. Hey, give me this. Yeah, hold it.
There's the tornado. Corn stalks in my lap. I got a haircut for the first time this year, just before this event. But there you can see the tornado moving out to the northeast. And that was actually a suction vortex that ejected off the north side of the tornado and then hit the Dominator. And that's what ramped that EF2 tornado up to an EF5, basically, in terms of wind speed. And that makes it very dangerous to intercept these tornadoes, even in the Dominator 3, because even if I'm eyeballing it, and I have to line them up visually first before I can determine if the tornado is safe to intercept it. So if you have a broadly rotating tornado like that, it can peel out a suction vortex at any time and impact the Dominator. And that's why we want to build a Dominator 5 that can even withstand an EF5 tornado. But it's these suction vortices inside of these tornadoes that really pack a punch. And this one was in Greenfield, Iowa, just last year. And look at those little flagellum-like suction vortices that are spinning around like an octopus inside of that tornado. And all of that white coloration is just cloud matter, basically fog, that is getting ejected up into the tornado. And that's where you have lower pressure, because the atmosphere more easily condenses at lower pressure. So you can basically just see the pressure field of that tornado as it's moving off to the northeast. This one happened last year just southwest of Greenfield, Iowa, and it was rated a high-end EF4 tornado. And you can see even the rear flank downdraft, which is those strong winds that wrap around the south side of the tornado. Those were taking down those wind turbines just outside of it. But in this tornado, it was a much stronger parent vortex. So those little suction vortices in there could even ramp the wind speeds up to the speed of sound. They might even approach 400 or 500 miles per hour in there, especially those little point vortices that go all the way to the ground. And on this day, we were driving up there in the Dominator 3, and then the turbo blew out in eastern Kansas, and the vehicle, we had to park it and tow it out of there, and we actually had to get a rental car for this storm chase. But if we were in the Dominator 3, we likely couldn't have handled this tornado and probably would have tried to intercept it on that east and west road there. But it's those suction vortices that, with the tornado of about 200 mile per hour winds already, those suction vortices could be ramping those winds up to 500 or 600 miles per hour on the real small scales. So that's what we really have to watch out for. And here you can see more of the fine scale structure inside of the Greenfield, Iowa tornado. This was captured by a drone. So the tornado was surging toward us at a speed of about 50 or 60 miles an hour. I launched my Mavic drone and it ended up orbiting the tornado. And we actually lost the drone. We had to go back out there and find it in a farmer's field to retrieve some of this footage. But you can see those rooster tails coming off the buildings there. That's all condensation, as well as all the sand and insulation gets ejected into the tornado and encourages those condensation plumes that develop. It also shows that the wind speeds are a lot stronger just outside of the tornado vortex. It's not confined to where the condensation happens. But look at those suction vortices there. Those are translating at speeds of 200 miles per hour, and each one of those has its own rotation, so it's easy to see that the wind speeds could be 500 or 600 miles per hour. But on this day, we ended up getting a couple hail dents on the rental car, and then I took it down to El Dorado, Oklahoma, and a cedar tree came through the windshield inside of a tornado there. And then I ended up blowing all the windows out, but I'll show you that video next with rental cars. This tornado was in 2007, May 4, 2007, and this is the first time that I saw those suction vortices in person.
Don't get in an accident.
That was Joel that was driving here, but that was actually the last time Joel ever let me drive the vehicle. We ended up switching right at the last second when the tornado was coming toward us. Joel had the door open and tried to put it in reverse and almost drove over my legs there. But then the tornado really ramped up just to our east as it was interacting with the friction of the earth. That's what causes those suction vortices to form. And you could just hear him zipping around in there. A loud roar of the tornado. I noticed that these small compact tornadoes have a higher frequency roar, kind of a combination of low frequency and a higher pitch noise to them. But the bigger tornadoes have just a really low rumble to them, so you can almost tell the size and shape of the tornado just by listening to them.
Oh no, those are structures. Oh no.
There's a barn. But watch this tree that this thing is approaching. You'll see the tree get flattened first. That's by the sinking air that surrounds the tornado, and then it gets ripped out by one of those suction vortices.
Can you hear that?
But that was the first time that I saw those suction vortices in action. And then I provided that video to a professor at the University of Oklahoma, and he compared it to some computer simulations and found that they have that helical configuration, the suction vortices, and they even have a kink just above the ground because of the friction of the earth. And the strongest pressure falls and winds are found from that kink all the way down to the Earth's surface. And as I mentioned, I don't always have the Dominator out there. The Dominator is constantly under repair. This year we had it out almost the whole season until toward the end we broke it next to the Gary, South Dakota tornado. There was about 150 mile per hour inflow jet on the rear end of that, and I was trying to intercept it from the back. I'll show you the video as well. But I jammed the brakes into the ground with the Dominator, and that ghost train that they call it, the inflow jet, was pulling the Dominator in toward the tornado. The mirrors bent out, the hood was bouncing up and down, the hood almost ripped open, and then the winds would have pulled the Dominator inside. And then we hit a deer on the way back. So the last couple of months we've been working on repairing the Dominator. But in this case, that was the rental car that I had in the Greenfield, Iowa tornado day. And then I took it down into the El Dorado tornado. And then I took it down to Levelland, Texas, and blew all the windows out from softball-sized hail. And then I returned this at the rental car company, and one of the employees posted this picture on Reddit, and it went viral. And now I'm on the do not rent list of all major rental car companies. And they're actually suing me for this vehicle, but I figured I could just maybe take it with all the hail dents and put a new windshield in it and still chasing it. But I think that brand new Ford Expedition is probably one of the best storm chasing vehicles I've ever chased in. It's like an apartment on wheels with four-wheel drive. But this is what a big time hail core looks like when you're approaching it. So if you're ever out on the road, do not do what you're about to see in this video. Do not attempt. But when you see that big milky sky like that, that means you're about to get hammered by some gorilla hail. Baseball, softball size hail. And even just 3 days ago, I was in the Oklahoma Panhandle in my Subaru, and I ended up experiencing one of the biggest hail cores I've ever experienced. 30 minutes of nonstop baseballs and softballs. I still have little glass shards embedded, but the modern windshield is designed so those shards work themselves out of you by themselves. But this one was up in eastern Wyoming. I was in a Nissan Sentra rental car on this day. I just left Deadwood, and you can see that massive hail core But you have to get through the hail to visualize the tornado. Sometimes you have to punch through the hail core, which is what this is called. But a lot of times you'll see cars driving the other direction with their emergency lights flashing. You can see I blew out the back window there. But you definitely feel exposed to the elements in those small rental cars or a Subaru. So that's why I even prefer to punch into these hail cores with my own personal vehicle usually. This was not done on purpose though. I was trying to get to the tornado on the other side. But the loss damage waiver doesn't always work. Keep that in mind too. There's a lot of fine print in there. This is another rental car intercept here, that same vehicle that I just showed you. Watch for that ribbon of dust on the horizon. That means they're getting wind-driven baseballs. They're hitting the ground, kicking up dirt. Whoa! I love hail. Always have. See the ones that are bouncing?
Here they come, folks.
But do not do this. You want to pull the car off to the side of the road and ride it out. Because it can increase the relative fall speed of the hailstones and you're driving into them like this. But I just wanted to get through it. I was hoping to dodge them and sustain minimal damage and then be able to see the tornado on the south side. I put my gas station sunglasses on, put the visor down. I try to deflect the shards, turn my lap. But it's the mesocyclone of the supercell that's rotating and it enhances the updraft so they're able to hold these baseballs and softballs into the storm. And sometimes they dump them all at once, the hail cores. And this was just 2 days ago, my Subaru. I called the Dominator 4 because I had chased in this. I didn't have a Dominator during the pandemic, so I took the Subaru and spray painted Dominator into the side of it. And then it started getting all these hail dents on the hood. And I ended up chasing Hurricane Ian with that Subaru, the original one that hood belonged to, and the 15-foot storm surge came in and swept my car away, and I was able to tow it out just to retrieve the hood, and then I've just been rotating it to a new refurbished Subaru, flood refurbished Subaru. So I blew the motor out of one last year, and I was trying to intercept a tornado in Silverton, Texas. And I was jamming the gas pedal down, I was making this clicking noise, the oil light popped on, and I blew the motor out right when I came up about 100 yards from the tornado, and just left that Subaru, got the hood. And then this is the 3rd generation of the Dominator 4. And we just got a new windshield today in Stillwater, Oklahoma. But you know that you storm chased hard when you have to tow the vehicle home. We actually had to tow it back from Laverne, Oklahoma. But the mayor of Laverne actually let us take shelter at his house. He made us food and everything, and we hung out with the mayor that night and then brought it back the next day. But here's that video.
Legendary gorilla hail core.
This thing's gonna go crazy. It's gonna shred the vehicle. There's the big hail core right there. I'm gonna wear the vehicle like a tuxedo after this. New circulation forming right here. See the inflow band? That actually produced a tornado right there, so we did see a tornado. Giant hail happening right there. Could end the chase. New wall cop further up. It is hard to punch into the hail core because sometimes you're worried you'll miss the tornado. And it's difficult to predict when they're going to dump their hail core as well. You have to look for the gradients and reflectivity on radar. But I've never seen such a persistent barrage of baseball and softball size hail. While you're driving through a hail core here, folks, you need to pull the car over to the side of the road when you get big hail like this, and that slows down the road. I always try to include a safety message with all these. It was bulging in like a bubble. Like a membrane.
I mean, we were moment.
But I've never made an insurance claim. I just put a new windshield in and keep driving. So that's the key, is just to never make an insurance claim. But the rental car thing has definitely caught up with me. So I think I've maybe damaged, not on purpose, 100 rental cars or so over the last 15 or 20 years. I worked with AccuWeather for 4 years, driving around rentals on the AccuWeather credit card too for many years, and then it caught up with me the last couple of years. But what I do is I just ignore the letters that come in for as long as I can, and I actually haven't heard from the last rental car company since March, so I'm hoping that it might just go away. But I've seen a lot of crazy things over the last 30 years of storm chasing, including a flying cow, just like the movie Twister. So, but I do think that the cow could have been set down gently because of the updrafts inside of the tornado. So if there are any animal lovers out there, I would shut your eyes on this one.
Check out this random.
I'm an animal lover too, so I understand. But this was also in a rental car here, this chase. The cows were reported missing on this day too, but see, they're not descending too fast, so. But this was in eastern Wyoming in 2018, just to the north of Cheyenne. And when this tornado first started touching down, I was in a rental car, and I was going through these old canyon roads, and I got a flat tire on the canyon roads, and I was probably about 10 or 15 miles from the tornado, just off in the distance, just touching down.
And decided to drive on the red.
So I had two choices. I could either fix the tire and miss the tornado, or I could drive on the rim. So I decided to drive on the rim with this rental car, went 15 miles, caught up to the tornado, and then it started retrograding back to me, and softball-sized hail was wrapping around the tornado. It blew all the windows out. And then I came into the destroyed town, and there was a guy that was emerging from the rubble. I'm a hard guy to talk over. And he emerged from the rubble. He was taking shelter underneath a stairwell, and he had two Siberian Huskies with him. And so I told him, you can take shelter in my rental car. And he hopped in the back with the two dogs, and they just shredded the interior of the car. It was all covered in mud. And then that guy helped me put on the donut tire, and I returned that vehicle with all the windows blown out, a donut tire. But we did help him shelter after the tornado. I also chased the widest tornado in history and the second widest tornado in history. The second widest one was the Hallam, Nebraska tornado on May 22nd, 2004. That one was 2.2 miles wide. And they call it a mega wedge. We call it a mega wedge when it's wider than 1.5 miles wide. When the wedge tornado, which is a tornado that's wider than it is tall, they can expand really wide when the whole entire low-level mesocyclone plants. But the El Reno wedge tornado was 2.6 miles wide, the widest in history, and it actually touched down as a multiple vortex tornado, and each of those individual suction vortices in there ranged in size from those little flagellum-like vortices all the way up to a quarter mile wide. And watch when this one first touched down. It was already big when it first touched down, and then it did a left-hand turn and expanded up over 2.6 miles wide, and we were trying to intercept this in the Dominator 1 and 2. I was trying to do a hook slice maneuver, which is where you go in through the back side of the supercell. And a lot of times when you punch through that rain and hail on the hook echo, you'll look off to the right and you'll have a high contrast view of the tornado coming at you. So we were trying to do that with the El Reno tornado. We ended up running into a live power line, and we couldn't free ourselves from the power line. The tornado, we were basically in the western side of the tornado as it expanded and covered the whole entire horizon. And we tried to free ourselves from the power line, so we'd back up as far as we could. It would tighten up, sparks flying everywhere. And finally it got so tight that it shot the hood off like a frisbee, and it went right into the El Reno tornado and never hit the ground. We never found it again either. But this is the El Reno tornado when it first touched down. I was working for Channel 4, the news station in Oklahoma City. They had helicopters flying around it, multiple storm chasing teams on the ground. And look at all those suction vortices. The tornado's really wide. You can see the funnel above it. And it's probably over a mile wide already. And then each of those suction vortices that touch down range in size from a few meters wide up to a quarter mile. That's the Dominator 2. You have horizontal funnels feeding into it. You know it's a really violent tornado when you get the horizontal funnels. Those are excited by the updrafts in a tornado, so you get crazy updrafts in a tornado, and it excites those little banana-like vortices that feed into the vortex. And this one was actually initially rated EF5 because the Doppler on Wheels, which is a mobile radar truck, measured winds in excess of 300 miles an hour just above the ground. But the damage at the surface, they didn't quite have the engineering quality to justify an EF5 rating. And we actually haven't had an EF5 since 2013 now. Even though I know I've seen a lot of EF5 strength tornadoes every year. It's just a lot of times if they don't hit anything, you don't have any evidence to justify a rating. It's a damage-based scale.
Yeah, I do.
But there's a lot of vertical winds in these vortices. All of that is just pressure fall, a pipe of low pressure all the way to the ground. And the strongest winds of a tornado are found right near ground level inside those suction vortices there. But very sadly, that tornado took the life of Tim Samaras, a mentor of ours, a great friend of mine. He was on the show Storm Chasers with us on Discovery Channel. And sadly, Tim, his son Paul, and Carl Young lost their lives in that tornado. And he was trying to deploy his turtle probes. These are legendary probes, ground probes, that he would deploy in the path of a tornado to measure the wind speed and the pressure fall inside of a tornado. And I first met Tim in 2003 when I was chasing the Manchester, South Dakota F4 tornado. And I was backing up to get out of the path of that tornado. I was a little bit scared of it. I was probably about 50 yards away. And suddenly I see Tim out of the corner of my eye zoom past, going toward the tornado, took a left-hand turn, and he dropped his turtle probe in the path of that tornado and measured a world record pressure fall of 100 millibars. And we live in about 1,000 millibars. That's the weight of the entire atmosphere above us. So that's a 10% drop in the pressure fall inside of a tornado. But all of our ground probes, even just doing science as a storm chaser, was all inspired by the late Tim Samaras, a pioneer of storm chasing and storm chasing science. And also Gizmo, another legendary storm chaser.
Woo!
Gizmo lived to be 17 years old, and she saw over 250 tornadoes. She saw a Category 5 hurricane, and she went to all 48 states, and has seen nor'easters, flash floods as well. This tornado right here, we actually got separated from the Dominator 3, and the tornado touched down at a freshly plowed field. And I had Gizmo in my hand right there. And as soon as the tornado touched down, I didn't have time to get back to the Dominator. So I just put Gizmo in my bread basket, put my back into the wind. I felt all the debris hitting me in the back. And then the tornado zoomed off to the northeast. But I actually had pink eye from that tornado for about 3 months after that. So that was when I realized that a lot of times these tornadoes are toxic, including the Joplin, Missouri EF5 tornado. The deadliest tornado in U.S. history had a case of flesh-eating bacteria with it. And so these tornadoes will go through freshly plowed fields. They pick up fungus and bacteria and other toxins. And one of our science mission goals next year is to actually measure the air quality inside of tornadoes. But you can also see a cast that Gizmo had. She was running after a German Shepherd, so I thought they were going to fight, and I didn't think Gizmo would do very well in that, so I ran after her and did a Superman dive, and I rolled up on Gizmo and actually broke her paw right there, so she had to have that cast on as well. But she lived to be 17. This is just after chasing a hurricane, picking her up. Yeah, she's only 5 pounds, so a tiny dog. But I think she's been inside probably 10 or 15 tornadoes, that little dog. So my first ever storm chasing vehicle was not a Dominator, believe it or not, but it was probably tougher than all the Dominator 1, 2, and 3 combined. And that's a 1985 Plymouth Reliant up in the upper left part of the screen. That was probably the best storm chasing vehicle that I ever owned, and it probably wouldn't even be dented by a baseball or softball sized hailstone. But I actually grew up in Michigan, in Grand Rapids, just to the east of here. But Lake Michigan a lot of times will kill the storms before they get to Grand Rapids. So I got a lot of wind bags out there, a lot of straight line wind events. But I would sneak out and chase lake effect snow squalls when I was growing up in Michigan. My mom actually didn't let me storm chase initially, so I had to sneak out and do it anyway. But then I went to the University of Oklahoma to study meteorology, drove that Chevy Lumina there, held together by duct tape, and I actually ended up abandoning that vehicle on the side of the road near the Kansas-Oklahoma border. I drove it 35,000 miles without changing the oil. in that one. So we realized that you don't actually have to change the oil every 5,000 miles, or whatever they say, but you could really push them to the limit. And I actually couldn't open the hood on that one. I mounted those little driving lights on the front. And every time I would take that car through a small town, I would get pulled over and have like a 2-hour-long full vehicle search every time. But then we built the Dominators, Dominator 1, 2, and 3 on the bottom. And that's Dominator 1 on the right. That's what everybody called the red shoe. And that actually started off as a 2008 Chevy Tahoe. And that was the first vehicle that I ever purchased with a bank loan. And then I instantly turned it into the red shoe and didn't tell anybody, of course, the insurance either. But we were able to build the Dominators because of our time on Discovery Channel Storm Chasers. And I was initially licensing footage to them for a couple of years, and then they put Sean Casey's voice over it. And then they contacted us a couple of years later and asked if we wanted to be on the show. And they paid us $12,000 the first year, but they allowed us to fund the build of the Dominators on the bottom, and then we could drive right into tornadoes. But I started off as a science nerd. I collected insects for like 15 years. I was an Eagle Scout. I didn't go through puberty until about age 25, so I did a lot of insect collecting. I played the oboe. Here's my bug collection. I specialize in moths and large beetles mostly, but caught all insects. But my true passion was always weather and storm chasing, but I loved all the sciences. And it was my mom that got me into the sciences. She's a middle school science teacher, and got me collecting insects right out of the gate. I still collect those big silk moth caterpillars in my nieces. But my mom was always against storm chasing. For herself, she obviously supported me storm chasing, but she came down to Oklahoma for graduation in 2015, and there happened to be a storm chase on the day that she landed. And she came into Oklahoma City, and I told her, "We're going storm chasing." And she's like, "No, we're not. Take me back to the hotel." But I downplayed the event, so she didn't think we were going to see anything. And we ended up seeing this crazy multiple vortex tornado. I was in a regular vehicle. I had to put my dad in the Dominator to keep him separate. And you can see once again, it was a multiple vortex tornado. And listen to my mom's audio in here, it's pretty funny. You can ramp this one up. And you can hear the roar of the suction vortices in this too. That was my hat. AccuWeather hat. But the tornado is much broader than this. Those are suction vortices again. It's kind of the bad guy of the presentation.
Read.
Give me the camera.
You're not safe. What the hell are you doing? Read. No. You're not safe? What the hell are you doing?
I promise. I got this under control.
Gizmo did a dingleberry.
Gizmo was on her lap in the back seat. She was trying everything to end the chase. And even after the intercept, she started pleading with us. But that was her last storm chase too, and her first. But I was glad that she got to be able to see the tornado. And so I went to the University of Oklahoma in 1998, and I saw my first tornado October 4 of 1998. And then my spring semester as a freshman, 5 of us meteorology students packed into a soft-top geo-tracker and chased the May 3rd, 1999 F5 tornado. And it was arguably the strongest tornado in history, with a 308-mile-per-hour wind measured just above the ground by the Doppler on wheels, and caused some of the most extensive damage out there. And I think the strongest tornadoes anywhere likely happen in the Great Plains, because they're not only powerful tornadoes, but they're also moving a little bit more slowly than the faster moving tornadoes that happen in Dixie Alley or the Mid-South. But I actually thought the geo-tracker was going airborne here. And we ended up abandoning the vehicle. Somebody had the bright idea to take shelter underneath the overpass. This was before the research came out that it could be more dangerous under one, but I still think it can shelter you from directional debris. But it is best just to bury your car in a ditch if you can't drive away from it. Don't abandon the vehicle though. But we abandoned the vehicle, got underneath the overpass, and there was a family freaking out, taking shelter underneath the overpass. This was just near Bridge Creek, where it was near peak intensity as an F5. But you can see it turned. It was coming toward us and then did that left-hand turn just southwest of Moore, Oklahoma. If I was in the Dominator, we would have been right up the road about a quarter mile, shooting rockets into the tornado, miniaturized sensors. That's our science mission, is to drive into the tornado with the Dominator, measure surface wind and pressure data with the Dominator, and at the same time we launch sensors into the tornado that get carried around inside to get the three-dimensional measurement of winds and pressure fall inside of a tornado. And if we can figure out the three-dimensional structure of the tornadic supercell, then that's at least a starting point, maybe toward tornado dissipation like was shown in the recent movie Twisters. But when I got to University of Oklahoma, we did a first series with Ken Cole. We met a film student out there that was also a meteorology student named Ken, and for his film project, he wanted to do a storm chasing series with Joel and I, who are also students. So he drove around with us in the 2003 and 2007 seasons, which were really active in the Great Plains. And this got our start with Storm Chasers because they saw this video and then put us in the first season, and that's what allowed us to fund our science mission in the build of the Dominators. But this also shows that first suction vortex tornado.
After a tornado outbreak ravaged the Great Plains just hours ago, hundreds are wounded or missing, with locations in Oklahoma reporting total devastation of residential areas.
We live for being within 200 yards of violent tornadoes.
It's back when cargo shorts were still happening.
Look at that, come down!
Put all your storm chasing tools in your pockets.
Hurry!
They use our footage in every single tornado documentary known to man because it's the best.
That's Joel, my late storm chasing partner and best friend, Joel Taylor. He was always the driver back then.
Right here on the right, a tornado on the right! Look at that, zoom up, get up there, Joe, get up! Wow!
Joel was always a safer guy too, safety conscious.
Shut your doors. Okay, go, back up! Oh my God, just look up!
It was an LP supercell too, not very much rain, but an occasional baseball hailstone falling out of that one.
That's high storm chase, right there!
And then that helped us get on the Storm Chaser series on Discovery Channel in 2008. And this was actually a staged photo. There's no way we'd be outside of the Dominator intercepting a tornado. You can see Joel and Chris using me as a shield there. But we did all kinds of promo shoots like that. We did 4 seasons of Storm Chasers. And that was our first time ever working with a TV crew. And a lot of times they will bring in the camera people and producers from either from California or from New York. And a lot of times they haven't seen severe weather like we get in the central US or in the Great Plains. And so it was a little difficult working with them. We actually got the executive producer in the path of a tornado by accident. And they were hit by a bouncing hay bale and blew all the windows out there. That was the last time she followed our team around. But we actually didn't have the insurance in place to intercept tornadoes at first. They wouldn't let us intercept, but Sean with the TIV had the paperwork in place. But we actually built the Dominators in secret. They always wanted us to be the underdog team in a regular vehicle, but we were always driving into tornadoes anyway with those beater vehicles, and we wanted to do it for science, so we ended up building the Dominator 1 off season, and then in season 2, all the producers suddenly saw our new vehicle in April the next year, and even though we were told we couldn't intercept tornadoes, we just started intercepting them right out of the gate, and we didn't even test the Dominator. We just picked it up and started driving into tornadoes, and it was actually built by the mechanic at the golf course that I worked at. His name was Kevin Barton, and he built race cars for the dirt tracks in Michigan, and he's the only guy I know with the creativity to build a Dominator back then, and Kevin built the Dominator 1, and we just drove right into our first tornado near Kirksville, Missouri on May 17 of 2009. And here's some of those promos from Storm Chasers.
Sunday on the season finale of Storm Chasers.
Take that road, baby.
There's the TIM, the Tornado Intercept vehicle.
The season is gathering, and no one is safe.
This was season 1, the 2008 season. We were just deploying a ground-based probe back then.
The season finale of Storm
That was when I
Chasers.
realized I was a spaz for the first time.
On the season finale of Storm Chasers.
You see Tim in this season,
Waiting for.
second season.
This is where it all comes together. This is what happens when you put yourself in the wrong place at exactly the right time.
It's gonna be intense, you guys.
Storm Chasers, the 2-hour
And that was a
season
window blowout in the Dominator 1, and we measured 138.8 mile per hour wind inside of that one, and it was actually a suction vortex that came around the backside of the tornado and blew the window out. But that was the worst case scenario because it was a weak tornado, and I thought we could handle it with the windows down, so I just had the windows down and I was looking up at it, and it intensified with us inside of the tornado, so you could feel the whole process happening. The pressure falls were so dramatic that our ears were popping, and the radar engineer in the back seat was operating the radar, and our camera guy looked at him before the window blew out, and he said, "Mick, your ear's bleeding." And he had a little stream of blood coming out of his ear from the pressure fall that blew out his eardrums. It actually wasn't from the glass out there, but that was when we first realized that the pressure falls inside of a tornado can definitely have impacts on the brain and even cause concussion-like symptoms, confusion for hours afterward. But we also did a Bud Light commercial for Storm Chasers. We saved the beer truck.
Suddenly, everything changed.
I did a TurboTax commercial too. But then I got audited 4 years in a row, and then the commercial disappeared. I was intercepting a tornado and throwing write-offs out the Dominator as it was getting more damaged.
Disaster reported again.
And we actually tested the Dominator after intercepting all those tornadoes for a Mythbusters series in 2009, and we parked the Dominator 1 behind a 747 jet, and they simulated 300 mile per hour winds. And you'll see that the TIB actually handled it fine, but the Dominator 1 ended up getting pushed across the ground. And this is when we realized we needed some type of a spike system. But the way that the Dominator is shaped, it has a downward force directed on it and eliminates the wind passing underneath the Dominator. So it behaves the opposite of an airplane wing. You don't get the lift that you get from the flat underside and round top of an airplane wing. If you can eliminate the wind underneath the vehicle, it'll always have that downward force. But when you're in the tornado, you can feel it bounce. You can kind of feel the wind grab the Dominator. And with the Dominator 2 and 3, we added 2 spikes in the front. So if we have a tailwind, you can start to feel it lift up the back of the Dominator a little bit. But our goal in building the Dominators, was to always make sure that they're mobile. So we didn't want to lose our mobility. The TIB was getting stuck on the side of the road a lot, and we didn't want that to happen, of course. So we tried to make a vehicle that could intercept, but also was very mobile, and we could maneuver around a lot. So this tornado happened in Andover, Kansas in 2022. And this one I captured with a drone, also a rental car. I launched the drone, and then I have trouble focusing sometimes, so I ended up driving after the tornado, left the drone in the air, and I found the drone the next day, thank goodness. But you can see that dynamic pipe of low pressure. See how it's spinning around in a circle and hovering just above the ground? And condensed cloud matter. That's just like a bulb of low pressure that's hovering just above the ground, but also drilling down toward the ground, just like a drill through a process called dynamic piping. And when it gets within range of the ground, it'll excite those vertical jet-like vortices underneath it that try to feed toward the lower pressure. And then if that dynamic pipe will plant, it'll expand into a cone or maybe even a wedge tornado. And the tornado's tightened up by the sinking air that's wrapping around it. So if you're approaching a mesocyclone and it looks like a mothership, like a big smooth updraft base, and then you start to see that clear slot carve into the backside of the mesocyclone, that's when the tornado genesis process is about to begin. And that sheath of sinking air wraps all the way around the funnel and then tightens it up, and then it gets stretched by the mesocyclone above it. Almost like a figure skater pulling in their arms, they spin a lot faster. But it's hard to tell what comes first, the clear slot or the tornado. There's definitely some debate what came first, the chicken or the egg. But all the tornadoes I've seen visually, I've seen over 1,000 tornadoes now and like 70 hurricanes. And every single tornado genesis process I've seen from underneath, I see that clear slot carve in and wrap totally around the inflow air. It gets that smooth nipple-like appearance, and then it drills through dynamic piping all the way down to the ground. But it's all driven by the mesocyclone above it. When you get a thunderstorm that develops, and it's in an environment with strong wind shear, it carves it up like a turkey, and it starts to spin like that, and it also gets some tilt. If you have no wind shear, the thunderstorm develops and then collapses on itself, and it's not a long-lived thunderstorm. But when you have wind shear, it gives it that lean and causes some broad rotation, and that enhances the updraft of the tornado. But also that tilt of the updraft keeps the downdraft and the updraft separated so that the supercell thunderstorm, which is one with a rotating updraft, can last a lot longer. And the tornado usually happens right underneath the mesocyclone, right up tight to the rain core. All the rain and the hail falls in the forward flank downdraft in that blue area, and that's why sometimes you have to punch from north to south through the hail to get visual of the tornado and to intercept it. And you can see those westerly winds that are wrapping around the south side of the tornado. That's called the RFD, or the rear flank downdraft. Sometimes you'll get like 120 mile an hour winds on the south side of a tornado because of the RFD, and you have to punch through that going south to north to get through the dirt just to see the tornado up there. But when you're launching a rocket at a tornado like this, you want to be in the inflow notch, basically right in between the forward flank downdraft and the tornado, and launch the rocket right at it. And then the parachute will pop out, and it'll pull the sensor into the tornado, and then it's just driven by the wind in there. And the GPS data is equivalent to the wind speed data then. And this is a radar image of a supercell storm looking down at it. That's the hook echo on the southwest side, and that's where the rain and the hail is wrapping around the updraft, and that's where the mesocyclone is located, and all the big hail falls in the forward flank downdraft down shear a little bit. So you have southwesterly winds, and it takes all the rain and hail out of the updraft when you have that tilt. And if you're doing a hook slice maneuver where you approach the storm from the back, you go through that little ribbon of rain and hail, and then the tornado is right, usually at the tip of the hook. Sometimes it'll be a little further up the hook-like appendage. And they have a lot of vertical winds in there. This is from Dr. Lee Orff up at the University of Wisconsin. Does all kinds of computer simulations of tornadoes and tornadic supercells. And it's all of that theory that shows that the wind speeds could easily approach 400 or 500 miles per hour inside of the suction vortices that are inside of a tornado. And you can even get sinking air in the middle of a tornado. And they're all different based on the life cycle of a tornado as well. A lot of times they start off as a bull funnel. They'll get a ground circulation even before the condensation reaches all the way to the all the way to the ground. The mature tornado is the cone or the wedge. That looks like more of a cone where it says wedge. But a wedge is actually a tornado that's wider than it is tall. But really, I don't think there's such thing as a wedge, because the tornado vortex, as we know it, probably goes up about 10 or 11,000 feet for most tornadoes up into the cloud base, but it's relative to the cloud base that you judge the shape of a tornado. And then when they rope out, that's when they're weakening as the sinking air that wraps around the tornado chokes it off in the mesocyclone, and they'll make some crazy little shapes, little loops in the vortex. But that's all just a condensation funnel, and a lot of times the tornado can extend a little bit wider than the condensation funnel. That one on the bottom is a multiple vortex tornado that I saw up in Canada in 2007. That was actually the day after Canada's first F5 tornado. June 22nd, 2007 was the F5, and then I saw that monster tornado the day after, which I think was even stronger than the F5, but it didn't hit anything and it ended up getting an F3 rating. But it split into those three big-time suction vortices, kind of like the El Reno tornado did. And we use the Fujita scale, the enhanced Fujita scale now, to determine tornado intensity, and it's a damage-based scale, so that's kind of a little bit of a meteorological flaw with this scale, but it's really the only thing you can go by is the damage that they leave behind. But if you have a tornado that hits a mobile home, that's an EF2, it'll totally destroy the mobile home. And if you have an EF5 coming in, it'll also totally destroy the mobile home. So just based on that mobile home damage, you can only give it an EF2 because you don't know if it was stronger than that. So you need higher quality engineering to justify an EF5 rating. So a lot of the enhanced Fujita scale is just an assessment of the quality of engineering in the country as well. But I know that I've seen a lot of EF5 tornadoes that didn't hit anything. You can just visually tell when they're spinning really rapidly, and you can tell by their sound as well, the roar that they make. And I do also chase hurricanes. I've cooled off a little bit on hurricanes recently just because really since the pandemic, you can't even get to the coastline to chase a hurricane anymore. They evacuate everything, rope it off, and so now I'm probably going to chase the tornadoes in the outer bands or maybe more inland flooding, because to get the raw power of a hurricane, you really need to be right in that right side eye wall where the wind is coming off the ocean, the relatively frictionless ocean, and it's just slamming the coastline to get the real 150 to 200 mile per hour winds. But the problem with that is you also get a tsunami-like wall of water that comes in called a storm surge. And that's what happened to the Subaru. That's the original Dominator 4 there when I was chasing Hurricane Ian. I finally got to the right side eye wall on the coast. I broke into this stilt home. I actually knew the person, but on the live stream they thought I broke into this house to survive the storm surge. But I got there just as the storm surge was coming in, and then it ended up sweeping the Dominator 4 away. But this is Hurricane Ian, actually. I'm going to tell you the Hurricane Katrina story next. But there's the storm surge as it was coming in, and it ended up getting 12 or 15 feet tall with waves on top of it. But just to experience the raw wind coming in off the ocean, you also have to experience the storm surge. And you have to pick the right stilt home because not all of them make it. You can have tankers come off the Gulf here and hit the home, all kinds of debris, other homes as well. So it's really dangerous to get right on the coastline to cover a hurricane like this. But I did end up seeing the stadium effect die with Hurricane Ian. We ended up making through the storm surge, and then you can see the blue sky above you. But a hurricane is such a large system that you can't really comprehend the curvature of the flow at ground level unless you're in the eye. But these are some of those raw 150 plus mile per hour winds. It was a high-end Category 4, but it was rated a Category 5 just offshore. So we were actually getting Category 5 winds as the eye wall started moving in. But it gets real foggy like that, very heavy rain. And all the eye wall is just stacked together supercell storms into a donut configuration. So you can even see tornadoes within the convection of an eye wall of a hurricane. But a lot of times they're pretty chaotic when you chase them too. Like Hurricane Katrina, for example, we were heading down there in a Honda Accord with Simon Brewer of Stormgasm.com. And just as we were going down there, those crazy messages were coming out that small vehicles would fly through the air and that there would be a toxic flood with fire ants floating on it, appliances would be flying through the air. So we were getting a little bit worried about covering our first Category 5. And we got into Slidell, Louisiana, and we were trying to get east to Mississippi, and we saw this crazy rusty dump truck coming at us, like flashing the lights at us. and then it tried to run us off the road. Next thing we know, this dump truck is trying to hit us head on, and we're in this high-speed chase with a dump truck, like 5 feet from our back end, with the eye wall starting to come in of Hurricane Katrina. And we saw police coming in the distance, so we started flashing our lights to let them know we've got this crazy guy chasing us in a dump truck. And they came up and did this sideways slide. 5 officers got out and pulled their weapons on us immediately. They had guns pulled on us. And I tried to tell them, I'm just a storm chaser. But I got pulled out of the car, and the dump truck was parked right there. And this 500-pound chief of police got out of the dump truck. His face was all red and just started roughing me up on the side of the car. And Simon was laughing at me as this was happening. And he took off and said, I want DNA tests on these guys. And so we ended up in the jail cell there in Slidell, Louisiana. The basement jail cell, the water was starting to come up, and they let all the inmates out to help prepare for the storm. And the guy in the dump truck didn't come back for several hours. And he finally got back, and they realized that they made a huge mistake and let us out of the jail cell. But by this time, the water was about 10 feet deep. Well, I think it was rising. It was probably about a foot or two deep, but we couldn't drive out with the Honda Accord yet. So we got all our supplies out of there. There were clumps of fire ants just floating on the water. And then the water ended up going up about 15 feet. We're on the 2nd floor of the police station. And we ended up hitchhiking out of there. So we had to ride out by fishing boat. And then we had a 2-day hitchhiking excursion to get back into cell phone coverage. But a lot of times that's how hurricane chasing goes, because you have crazy people that will stay behind. Some people can't evacuate at all. You have a lot of criminals that are there. I've seen carjackings in hurricane zones, and it's just kind of a crazy storm to chase. But tornadoes are a lot different. It's a lot faster paced. Sometimes you're in sunshine for most of the day, and you're not embedded in these hurricane zones. And sometimes you'll be down there for weeks, trapped on these barrier islands and helping out in the search and recovery effort. But our science mission is mainly focused around tornadoes. You can see I made this multiple vortex tornado in Microsoft Paint there many years ago. And this was my plan for our science mission about 10 years ago, was to intercept the tornado at the base with the dominators to measure the surface wind and pressure data. And at the same time, we're shooting rockets with miniaturized sensors in the nose cone. And we're also deploying an array of ground-based probes, not like Tim's turtle probes, but they're little lawn dart probes that we call them. So we're gonna use an FPV drone and drop those dart-like probes into the ground. And eventually, we'll have dozens of sensors floating around inside of the tornado, sending live data back during our live stream so that we can get a real-time tornado intensity estimate and learn a lot more about the three-dimensional structure of the thermodynamics of the tornado and the mesocyclone. But so far, we've only gotten one sensor into the tornado at a time. We've gotten about 4 or 5 rockets into the tornado so far, one by air cannon that you saw in that first video. That one, though, we haven't found yet. We have live tracking with the sensors, but we saw that parachute shoot straight up, and we've been searching all around Huntsville, Alabama for that sensor, but we don't quite have that one yet. But here is some rocket testing that we've been doing. And the reason that we're using rockets is because of the sheath of sinking air that often surrounds a tornado. So we need that propulsion to get through the sinking air to get to the vortex. And once inside, the nose cone pops off and the parachute deploys, and it's carried around inside the vortex, just like the movie Twister. And we've got to get after the rocket. So as the probe is getting carried around inside of the tornado, we're immediately getting live data like this. We've got pressure, relative humidity, we've got IMU acceleration, we've got our GPS position. And we even have the data of exactly how the sensor is tumbling around in 3D. But right now, we're only getting live data at 1 time per second. But we actually have to recover the physical sensor to get the super high resolution data. But for the Lawrence to Linville EF4 tornado, the tornado carried it over 26 miles away from where we launched it. Mark, how is the rocket? That was in Northeast Kansas?
I believe so.
How high is it?
10,000.
10,000? 10,000 feet? No,
Yeah.
no, 10,000 meters.
Yeah.
30,000 feet, guys. And there it is, the yellow. There it is, right there. So the sensors, when they go into the tornado, they send live data back through that receiver that Mark was holding out the window to get the live data. But we can only get data at a rate of 1 time a second streamed live. So we have to recover the actual sensor to get the 10 times per second data. But as we're launching through our air cannons and our rocket launches and intercepting the tornado with the Dominators, we're also flying an FPV drone and dropping these new lawn dart sensors on the ground.
That's the spear probe.
But some obvious safety concerns with this, if there's a human or a cow or something underneath, you have to make sure that it's clear terrain that you're dropping on. In the path of a tornado, you gotta hope that it will be.
Like Tiger Woods.
It'll drop off and then spike into the ground. And then we'll read wind speeds from it, so surface wind speeds.
So we have a pitot tube in there with little tiny holes, and we'll measure the wind through a pressure difference across that. And that was also inspired by Tim Samaras, who had a pitot tube anemometer mounted on top of the Dominator 1. And as I mentioned, the Dominator 1 started off as a Chevy Tahoe. I got one chase in that vehicle before we built the Dominator 1 out of it, and it started off looking more like a red shoe. And then we ended up putting Line-X bed liner on the outside. It initially was just 16 gauge steel, but we shot a couple 2x4s at the outside of just the steel, and they shot right through. So we had to put Line-X bed liner on the outside of the Dominator, and we had polycarbonate windows, bullet-resistant windows. And now with the Dominator 3, everything is automated. So I flip a switch, all the windows go up. I flip another switch, and the spikes will go into the ground. But Dominator 1 actually didn't have spikes, so we would slide across the ground often when we intercepted the tornadoes. And that one on the upper right was from June 17, 2009 with the window blowout incident. You can see a little bit of ketchup coming off the side of my face there. And on that same day, we were flying a drone for the first time to drop parachute probes as we would intercept the tornado with Dominator 1. And this was before the time that you could get a Mavic drone at Walmart or Best Buy. So we had to develop one with like a 16-foot wingspan that had the parachute probes inside of it, so you could press a button and then just deploy the parachute probes into the inflow. But we learned a big thing on this day, that when we dropped the parachute probes, they would be racing toward the tornado, and they would hit that sheath of sinking air and just be driven right into the ground instead of making it all the way to the tornado. So we realized that we needed to use rockets or air cannons or just drive right into the tornado anyway to get sensors that we could release into the vortex. But we almost pulled it off on this day. We intercepted the tornado with Dominator 1, measured 138.8 mile per hour wind. We had a vertical radar measuring updrafts and downdrafts inside. These sensors were trying to go to the tornado, but they didn't quite make it. They hit the rear flank downdraft, which you can see that clear slot carving right into the mesocyclone right there. So the tornado always happens a little bit back behind the gust front when you're looking at a storm like this. That's what it looks like, the nipple, when it's coming down on you, the tornado. You can see it already had a ground circulation, but it was one of those condensed bowl funnels above the ground, and then it intensified with us inside. There's the production crew getting out of there. This one had suction vortices too, even from birth. I think most tornadoes have suction vortices with them at some point in their life cycle. But it started intensifying with us inside of it here. Ears popping.
Chris, look, we're in it. Ears popping. Low pressure. Standing right arm. We're inside it right now. Look at this.
A little chicken down here on the dash.
All right, right and left. All right, we gotta get out of here.
And that was the impact of the suction vortex. Our roof camera showed a pressure wave coming across the ground just before I hit the Dominator.
We're inside it right now. Look at this. Look around.
See on the ground? That's a pressure wave of the suction vortex. A lot of times they'll form on the back side of the tornado and spiral around the south side of it.